bringing people together to collaborate requires a few key ingredients. And I guess the fact that you're watching this video is that you've become one of those key ingredients. Now, the ingredient that I'm referring to is facilitation. Now, if you're going to be running your activities using Mural, you need to know that there's a couple of really key superpowers, like we refer to them, that is available to you as a facilitator. Now, these facilitation superpowers will help you customize your activities so you can put your own stamp on it. Make sure that you run your sessions, your activities in a more structured way so people don't get lost. And then, of course, most important of all is that it'll enable you to make sure that people can collaborate more effectively. So the next couple of video clips, I'm going to deep dive all the facilitation features as available to you in Mural. Now, before I get into that, I also want to show you that I have a companion mural or canvas available that you can actually go and look at. And the link to that canvas is available to you. You can create it as a template in the caption below. Now, this template will have all the videos available, the full-length video, and then all the shorter clips. But then also here at the end of the canvas, I'm going to be adding additional resources around facilitation that you might find useful. So jump into the link below and copy a template into your workspace. Now, without further ado, let's get cracking. Facilitation superpowers. Where do I find my powers? How do I know that I have the powers in the first place? And how can I grant and share those powers with someone else? Let's quickly jump into the canvas and I'll show you. Now, when you create a canvas in Mural by default in your workspace, you will become the facilitator of said canvas. Now, the way you see that or identify that is by looking at the top right corner here. You'll notice that there's all these new little functionalities and features available to you. These are all the functional facilitation superpowers that live here in the top right corner. There's also another visual indicator that I want to point out, and it's here at the bottom bar. Now, this bottom bar indicates who's currently active in a specific canvas. So here you'll notice that I have a visitor and then, of course, my photo over here. What is important though, and what I want to indicate here with my photo, is that you'll see that there's a little star here. That star is fancy Mural speak to indicate that that person with that little star is a facilitator in the canvas. Now, the reason I'm kind of hammering on about it and pointing this out is a little bit of a side tip. Now, imagine you walk into a room, there's a whole bunch of people standing in front of a whiteboard. How do you know who's the important person? Where do I go to join these people? What must I be looking at? Now, one of the features, general features available in Mural, is that if I go over here and I click on one of these images, that'll transport me to whatever that specific person is looking at that point in time. So as a general rule of thumb, when I invite people into an activity or I'm running a session, I always point out to people, like, hey folks, here's my photo at the bottom here. Remember, I might have a co-facilitator with me. Look for those stars. If you ever get lost or distracted, click on the little image with the star and you'll join that facilitator on that specific space in the Mural. So it just makes the navigation for people, especially new users, much, much easier, and also make sure that they keep their attention to whatever you're doing inside the canvas. Now, the last point I want to cover quickly is the fact that as a best practice, and you probably know this, is that you need to have a co-facilitator. Now, in general, when you create the new canvas, you'll be the only facilitator. So you require the ability to grant these facilitation superpowers onto someone else. Or perhaps in future, you can get invited into a canvas. You might request those superpowers from someone. At least now you'll know how that is done. So I'm going to go here back to the top right corner, and you'll notice that there's a little members icon here. Now, in general, this icon is available to you. If you click that down, you'll notice or see who else has been invited to participate as a member in this canvas. This list is relatively short. Of course, here's my photo, and you'll notice that's got a little star here. But in the past, I invited one of my colleagues, Theo, to come and join and help build this canvas with me. Now, you'll notice here that Theo does have the little facilitation star on her icon here. That means that she is indeed a facilitator in this canvas. Now, how did I do that? So if I click on Theo's details here, you'll notice that I am able to change what she's able to do inside the canvas. I can put her into view only mode. So next time if she joins, she can't do anything. She can just see what's going on in the canvas. Or I can put or change her into only a normal participant. That means she doesn't have access to the facilitation superpowers. Or I can grant her facilitation superpowers by clicking on that selection here. And then you'll notice that she's got a little star here. That means that the next time she joins the canvas, she will have access to all these features over here that is related to facilitation. Of course, this is important. While you're running your activity, you might run into some Wi-Fi problems. Your laptop might decide to do a big software installation. You need someone to take over from you to run, let's say, voting sessions, go into private mode, or help people navigate the canvas. And that's really important to always have someone take over from you and fill your shoes in case something goes wrong. So as a facilitator, you have access to a couple of additional customization features. One of those features are actually something that you might require on the fly. And I'm going to show you how that works in a second. So you'll see that here I'm still using one of the older kind of, I call them bordered canvases. So the canvas has a fixed size. And maybe you, I know you're an expert, you're running an awesome session and you start seeing that the canvas is too small, people are generating ideas, I need more space. Now, as a facilitator, what you can do is you hover over the edge here, a little double-sided arrow will appear and you can then change the scale and size of this, this canvas on the fly. That's an awesome way to just adjust the sizing based on the content that people are creating. There's additional features that you have access to customize. And if I go to the top left corner here, you'll see a little drop down here arrow. Click on that and you'll see that there's an option here to change mural settings. I'm going to click on that. It'll open a new modal to you. And the first and easiest setting that you can change here is to rename the canvas. So you can change it to whatever name you want to as a facilitator. The second element here is related to the new user interface. If you toggle that on and off, you'll go to the old look and feel of the elements on the canvas, or like I'm doing now, I'm using the new user interface elements. The third element here is related to the paper color of a specific canvas. So you can switch that on and off and change the color of the canvas if you so want to do that. Then you can also explore the sizing of the canvas that you want to use. For this example, I've used one of the custom size canvases. As you can see over here, I entered my own pixel sizes, so I have control of the canvas. Something else that's very popular that people are using at the moment is an actual infinite canvas that you can toggle over here. So then you don't have that no man's land anymore and people can just add content and the canvas will grow as you add content. The other control you have to customize things slightly is also the sound or the chime that the timer will play when it runs out of time. I'm going to show you how the timer works in a second, but you can adjust the chime here by selecting one of three chimes. So the one that I usually use is the travel chime, but you can change it to an animal or to one of the music instruments, and you can have a listen to what that sounds like over here. Remember, that chime will play and be audible to everybody active in the canvas at that point in time. But we'll get to that with the timer. You also have the ability to adapt or change the icons for the visitors slightly. So you probably noticed earlier in one of the earlier videos, I showed you one of the visitors. That visitor came in with an animal icon. I can go and change that to either a music instruments or travel. And then if you want to have a quick look at what these icons look like and what is available to you, you can click down here and here is a list of icons that are available to the users coming in. There is times that you want to be sensitive about which icons you want to use. So this is a great way to review that when you set up and customize your platform. So that is some of the easy and quick to use features that are available to you as a facilitator. So let's jump into one of my favorite features, and that is the laser pointer. Now, there are times that you may be running an activity and you want to highlight maybe a little small detail, and the laser pointer is excellent for this. Now, you've probably seen me use it in one of the previous video clips, but let me quickly go through that again. Now, the general way is that you'll see that the laser pointer lives up here. It looks like a little arrow with a laser spark shooting off of it. You'll click on that. It'll activate the laser pointer and then you're able to highlight elements on the canvas. Now, you can use this as part of a screen share, or when you take Mural into a presentation mode, people can see what you're highlighting. So for example, we are now in the laser pointer section of all the video clips. However, I also have to point out that for anybody currently active in the Mural, they'll be able to see this little red trail here. Now, the red trail stays on, and I have two options to switch that off. I can hit the escape button on my keyboard, or I can go back to the icon and just switch the laser pointer off. Now, I know that you are much cooler than that, and you're probably thinking, Vanner, just give me the keyboard shortcut. And indeed, the laser pointer has a keyboard shortcut. If you hit the H key on your keyboard, the laser pointer activates, and I can highlight the content I want to highlight and mess around. But then once I release the H, the laser pointer goes away. And that's a really nice intuitive way if you want to be highlighting things on the fly. So that is the laser pointer, one of my favorite features in the Facilitation Superpowers set. It's time to talk about that feature that any facilitator worth their salt has forgotten about at least once, and that is the Facilitation Superlock. Now, to explain this, let me draw out this scenario. And trust me, I've seen this happen in sessions so many times. Now, I've grabbed an awesome heading here. You can see my heading over here. And of course, I jumped into the frameworks over here and I just dragged in the event canvas. And I've asked my colleagues to come in and brainstorm with me. And inevitably, at some point, someone drags in a sticky note, or maybe they want to select a whole bunch of sticky notes and remove them and make sure, hey, that these sticky notes are in the right place. I grab the sticky notes and then my whole awesome heading goes along with that. Then someone freaks out, tries to select this, then selects the whole canvas. Everything starts moving off. And trust me, I've been in sessions where this happens and it is a disaster for the facilitator to try and control things, and you don't want that to happen. And luckily, because you are awesome, you're going to learn how to control the layout of a canvas. Now, jokes aside, of course, what I'm trying to get at is that there's always going to be certain features within a template or canvas that you set up that you want your collaborators to leave alone. They shouldn't be moving it. This might be headings, descriptions of activities, or specific pieces of content that you just need to be there for instructional purposes or for any other use case that you might think of. And to ensure that no one can actually move this, it's very easy. So I'm going to just quickly demonstrate that by clicking on this heading. And then what you'll see is that there's a little contextual menu that pops up. And the easiest way to do this is to go over to the lock over here, click on the down arrow, and you'll see that you have two options here. You can lock something normally. Now that is anybody can come and unlock it, so facilitators and members alike, or you can do a facilitator lock. So if I click on that, you'll see the little lock icon appear over here. And then indeed, if I try and move this element around, it can't be moved because it's been facilitator locked. So if you invite members into this canvas, they can't touch or move this piece of content. Now, I can see the alignment is a little bit off there. Maybe I want to change that. One of the easiest ways to just unlock something, but you have to be the facilitator here, is to right click on that indeed. And you'll see that you have this little drop down menu pop up. And then you have the opportunity to unlock or unlock all. Now, I want to quickly just talk about this. So if I select unlock all, I'm going to do that for a second, you'll see that there a little modal or warning will pop up. Now, imagine you have a canvas with a whole bunch of stuff that you've locked down. It's ready to rock and roll. The last thing you want to do is to unlock everything to change the position of one thing. So you don't want to do that. I'm going to go back and then click on that, and you're going to say, just unlock that specific element. Now I can go back in and I can move this around and replace or position this in the place I want it to be. So let's line it up for the OCD there. Click on the lock again, and I'm going to lock this element down. That being said, maybe you want to unlock or modify more than one element. And for that, I'm just going to demonstrate here that I'm going to grab this canvas. And now remember, this canvas, this event canvas is part of our framework library. It's a framework. And for the most part, you want to also lock these frameworks down. So I'm going to demonstrate it again. I've got the framework selected. I click on the little down arrow there, click on facilitation lock, and indeed this element is now locked down. Now, let's say I want to select these two elements and unlock them. Now, the easiest way to do that is by hitting Shift and Command on your keyboard and then selecting these elements that you want to modify. So if I go and do that, you'll see that I indeed have the two locks here. I've now selected these two elements to do something with them. I'm going to right click on this one piece element here. And what you'll see now is this drop down will show you unlock selection. So if I click on that now, you'll see that the selection is indeed now being unlocked. Remember, I can go back in, I can select the elements here. And then of course, and I'm going to demonstrate a different way here quickly. The one that I actually prefer using, maybe I'm a little bit old school, is if I'm going to lock something down, I can then right click and then another contextual menu pops up. And what I like about this menu is that it also like kind of writes out what it is that you want to do. So you'll see that there is the access. It's the same as the little lock I showed you before. You have access here to lock. It'll tell you here that any member can unlock it, or I want only facilitators to be able to unlock this. So of course, that's the one that I use most of the time. I click on that and you'll see the locks appear again. And now you're ready to rock and roll and run your session, and be assured that no one's going to come in and change the layout of your canvas. So the next feature is awesome if you want to build in a little bit more structure or perhaps build out an agenda for your session. Now we're going to be looking at the outline feature. Now, where will you find the outline feature? So if you go to the top right corner here, you'll see that there's this little icon here. It's called the outline. And indeed, if you click on it, a bar will open up here on the right-hand side that has all your outline items. I have taken the liberty to just add an item here for this demonstration, and I'll show you how you can go and add some content into the outline. But initially, when you create a new canvas and you click on that icon, you'll see that there's some instructions. And in theory, you don't have to read those instructions because you've watched this video. That being said, the elements on the outline, the content on the outline is available to anybody coming into the mural. So it's a great way to help people find their way. But you as a facilitator is the only one that are able to actually go in and change the content and order of the elements on the outline. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Now at the baseline though, I need to point out that this outline feature is actually in a technical way, just a link or a physical position or address to a piece of content on the canvas that you place here on the outline. So at the baseline, if I go ahead here and I see my little sticky note item that I've added here in the outline, if I click on that, it should navigate me straight through to where the sticky note is on the canvas. And indeed, it's done that. Additionally, which is something that is super useful and a feature I want to point out is that as a facilitator, you also have the ability to switch the element on and off by using the outline. So actually what I should say is you can show or hide that element. Now, if you look at the corner here, I'm going to hover over this element. You'll see a little eyeball appear. At the moment, this element is visible. And what I can do is I can click on that eyeball and it will actually hide this element. I want to point out though, if another member comes in or facilitator, they come in, what they're going to see is this little grayed out area here, but they will not be able to interact with this element. Another thing that I need to be careful with to point out is that if any other facilitator comes in and they go to the outline here, they will be able to toggle this piece of content on or off by clicking on the outline over here. That is by intent though. Now, if I'm clicking on that eyeball again, you'll see it'll reveal the content. Now, this is really useful if you want to build out a canvas that progressively reveals activities over time, or perhaps you want to set up the canvas in a way where you don't want to reveal some of the content to the collaborators in the canvas at that point in time. You can then use this as you're navigating through the canvas to reveal the content or hide the content within your control. Now, the most basic thing you're probably wondering is like, Vanner, how do I actually add a piece of content to the outline in the first place? That is super easy. You can add most pieces of content to the outline or a reference point to the outline. For this example, I'm just going to grab my favorite little icon, which is a hamster, drag and drop it here on the canvas. And then what you do is you right click on this little piece of content. And of course, you can also group content or take an area. I'll show you a little bit about that in a second. But if you right click on this item and scroll down, you'll have this little call to action here that says add to outline. I'm going to do that. And what you'll see here on the right hand side is that address or that item is now being added to the outline. Because this is a new piece of content, I can now name it whatever I want. So it might be part of the agenda or just awesome hamster. And now it's part of the outline. And indeed it works. So if I click on that, it'll take me to the hamster. And of course, as I pointed out earlier, I can also show and hide this little hamster. There's additional features to the outline though that I want to point out. So if I go to these little dots here, I have a couple of additional elements. So I can go in, I can rename this item, maybe a bit more descriptive. I can also add instructions, and I just want to quickly show you that. So if I click that open, a modal will open up and I can add some additional content here. So for example, I said feed the hamster cheese. And if I save that, you will see that the little instruction or indication of the instructions actually lives here in the outline element. This is great if you want to use the outline, let's say for asynchronous meeting where you want people to be able to navigate to a specific space in the canvas, but then you want to just leave some instructions for your collaborators to let them know what they need to do in this space. So you can use the outline to do that as well. I also want to point out that if you go into this area here and you edit the instructions, for example, you can add, you can format a little bit. There's also a feature that not a lot of people know about, is that if you grab a YouTube link, you can actually paste a video into this area as well. So we've had some of our users actually use a Mural as a learning management system where people go through the experience using the outline. Now, the next feature I want to quickly point out here is that you also have the ability as a facilitator to change the order of the elements in the outline. So the way you do that is by grabbing the element and just dragging it up and down to change the order. So you'll see it just takes effect. And of course, I can go back and move it back to where I want it to be. Now, there's a little bit more advanced interaction that I enjoy with the outline when it comes to areas. Now, I'm not covering areas in the Facilitation Superpowers, but it's a super handy feature where you can use an area to cluster certain elements together. So I always say to people I train that this is like a loose grouping. So you'll see here that if I grab this cluster, I'll move it around and you'll see that the sticky notes in the cluster is actually moving with this group. However, I can go in and I can actually move the sticky note outside or into another cluster if I want to. So if I grab this area again here, they'll move around. So this is a really cool way, one of the use cases to actually build or create clusters. Let's say you're doing ideation, you want to create quick clusters. But this video is about the outline element. Now, what is nice about areas is that if I grab an area, like I'm doing over here, and I go and right click on that, and of course I get that little drop down, and as expected, you can also add this area to the outline. So I'm going to click on that. Watch what's happening on the right hand side. You'll see that what the system does, it actually grabs the title of the outline or the area here, apologies, and then makes that the title of the actual element here that I've just added. So the headers kind of update. Now you'll see that I made a little mistake there, misspelling the cluster name. So I'm going to go in there and say cluster 1. Hit enter. Now it's a part of the outline. It's here. And if I click on that, it will take me to this area. However, it's also updated the headline. So for certain use cases, this is brilliant. If you're using Mural as a presentation tool, or you want to name your areas and make sure that the names are related and these outline elements update on the fly, I would recommend that you use areas. And that, for the most part, is an awesome way to bring structure to your sessions, is by using the outline feature. Let's take your customization and control to the next level. The next feature I'm going to be talking about is the custom toolbar. Now, when I refer to toolbar, I'm talking about this element located here on the left-hand side. Of course, you're well familiar with this. This is your ability. When I say your facilitators, members, and visitors are like ability to add content to the canvas. So your sticky notes, text, shapes, icons, everything lives in this little toolbar and allows people to collaborate and interact and add content to the canvas. However, as a facilitator, from time to time, you require people to only use a certain element in that toolbar. Of course, you can instruct them to do so. So for, let's say you're running a brainstorm activity where you want people to only use sticky notes to respond to the prompt, or perhaps only icons, for example, you can instruct that, but you can make it even easier for your fellow collaborators by controlling what shows up in this toolbar. Now, how do you do that? Now, if you go to the top here where all your facilitation tool features live, you'll see that there's a little toolbox over here. And this is how you actually go ahead and actually control what shows up in this toolbar on the left-hand side here. So I'm going to click on that, open that up. And then what you'll notice here is that there's a whole bunch of check boxes here that corresponds with the elements that are located here in your custom toolbar. Pretty obvious, right? But there's a few little quirks that I want to point out. First of all, to activate this feature, you need to toggle this feature on. And I want you to take note of two things. First of all, this little blue mark here shows you that the custom toolbar is indeed active. But there's also a visual indicator here at the top that shows you that the custom toolbar is actually in place. And there's a very good reason for that. However, let's get into the base functionality. So in my example, I said, listen, let's create an exercise where we only want people to have access to the icons. So as easy as that, I go in and I switch all the elements off, but I want you to take note that you can't actually see anything happening on the left-hand side there. However, I am actually changing the navigation bar, and I'll prove to you that that is true. So let's say I'm doing an exercise where I only want to do icons and images, and I want to preview what other people are currently seeing in the canvas. I click on the preview element here located in this dropdown. So when I activate that, indeed, only the images and icons are visible. And this is what people are currently seeing in the canvas right now. Now, I mentioned that I only wanted to use icons, so I can, of course, go and toggle the images off, and you'll see that the image icon has now disappeared. I can then add images or elements to that navigation bar, and the toolbar will then update accordingly. I can also interact with the canvas and continue with my business and work like everybody is working. But as a facilitator, I have the ability to actually have access to the full toolbar. This is when I go out of exit. You'll notice that I now have, as a facilitator, access to all the elements on the toolbar, so I can cheat and use everything. But I want you to take note, the custom toolbar is still active. The way I know this is by the little icon here at the top right corner. The custom toolbar is still active, and people who are using the canvas at the moment can only see, if I go into preview, the elements that are currently here on this toolbar here. The reason I'm highlighting this is that from time to time, people use the custom toolbar, and forget to switch off the toolbar. Don't worry, your fellow collaborators will remind you if that happens. Now, back to the point. Now, if you want to switch off the custom toolbar and go back to its default state, the only thing you have to do is go here, toggle this off. You'll see the state here also changes, and now you're back to normal usage of the custom toolbar. And that is how easy it is to just modify the toolbar and make it interesting for people using your canvas. Now, any facilitator worth their salt knows that it's really important to keep track of time, or at least the ability to have some way to time box your activities. And as part of Mural's feature set, you have access to your own little timer here at the top right of your Facilitation Superpowers. Now, the timer is really important to use for yourself. Let's say you want to time box some of your own activities, or perhaps there's a voting session or an activity that you want to time box. This is where you want to use the timer. So what I'm also trying to say is that you can use the timer in conjunction with some of the other facilitation superpowers that is available to you. Now, to control the timer is pretty straightforward. You go to the top right corner here, you click on the timer function, and that will open up a few settings for you. At default, my timer is set at 5 minutes, and of course you can increase the time, or you can just go into the box itself and add your own custom time in there if you want. I'm going to go over and let's say set this up to 12 minutes here, and then I have the ability to actually set the chime. So when the time runs out in this timer, I'm able to control the sound it makes a little bit. So I have the ability to say I want it to sound like a cello, airplane, or cuckoo. Limited, but it does and gets the job done. However, I also have the option to say none. So for some folks, they use Mural to actually do presentations. It's one of the use cases, and they want to time box themselves. Of course, they don't want to have a chime play. They just want a visual indicator of the time that's kind of running out. So you can opt to actually switch off that alarm sound if you so wish. I'm just going to put that back for now, and I'm going to start the timer. And I want you to take note of what happens in the top toolbar there. So I'm starting the timer. It's going to activate, and then you'll see the actual countdown happening. So I'm just going to zoom out for a second, and you'll see it's pretty straightforward and clear here in the canvas layout, and people can see how the timer is then interacting. Now, just keep note that everybody is actually able to see that timer, and they will also hear a chime when this timer runs out. So it's a great way for people to interact in the canvas. Another point that I'll make about the timer is that if I decided to leave the canvas, or I have a really extended timer, or something goes wrong and I want to refresh the browser, or I have to restart my laptop, heaven forbid, the timer will continue running. It's running in the canvas. So your other facilitators can also control the timer if they so wish. Now, The other element that I want to point out is you can also interact with the timer while it's running as a facilitator. Now, we've all been in sessions where perhaps people have had a really awesome conversation, things get really intense. You want to extend the time a little bit. You can go in here, hit the plus button, it'll add a minute or two to your timer. However, maybe you want to be sneaky because you see the activity is running a little bit slow. You can also decrease the timer here if you so wish to do so. The other thing is also, let's say there's a lunch break and you're running a really long timer. You can go in here and pause the timer if you so wish, right? And that then brings the timer to a standstill. The other thing that you might want to do, you can see here with the color indicator at the top, it's now paused. You can go ahead and then you can resume the timer. Of course, you don't have to let the timer run out. You can go in, click on the timer and then end the timer, and that will then cancel the timer for you and give people an indication that the timer is indeed ended. And that's how easy the timer is. It's a great little feature that people use all the time here at Mural, even if it's just to time box yourself during sessions. And I'm time boxing myself, and let's jump into the next feature. It's time to get democratic. Let's jump into dot voting using Mural. And as I've mentioned or pointed out, you can indeed run voting sessions in Mural. And this is probably one of the most important and most used facilitation features that you're going to have to implement when you run your activities. Now, what is important to note though, before I get into the functionality, is that if you imagine yourself, and perhaps you've done a couple of these in-person sessions, is that the idea is that you give people a set of votes or a number of votes, and they can go and then, let's say, vote on a bunch of concepts that you've put in front of them, and that helps you prioritize things. Now, in the real world, this is really easy to do because you maybe have a couple of pieces of paper hanging on the wall, and it's pretty obvious where people have to stick their stickers to make their votes. However, when it comes into the digital world, you need to be a little bit more careful because you have to control where people can vote. Because remember, everybody is standing in front of this big virtual whiteboard, and they have these digital votes in their hand, and they can place it anywhere. So they can vote on the header, they can vote on sticky notes, images, whatever, and you need to control that. And that's even more important than activating a voting session in Mural. And I'm going to show you how to do all of that right now. So how do you actually, and where do you find the voting element? So if you go over to the top here, as usual, you see all your superpower features sitting over here, and there you have your voting functionality. Now, before I activate this, I actually created a little scenario over here that I'm going to use to demo how I set up a voting session. Now, to just set up my scenario properly, I have a whole bunch of elements over here, and as I tried to explain earlier, if I don't do this properly, I can actually activate this and people can vote on anything on this little feature set here. They can vote on the hamster, which I would love them to do, but actually I want them to actually highlight and prioritize these three ideas that I have here on the canvas. So how do I control that, and how do I run a voting session to prioritize and decide which idea my team needs to select? Great, so we're going to go up to the voting feature over here, and I'm going to activate this little element over here. And I'm going to start a voting session, the first feature or function link that I have over here. When I click that, it's going to bring up a little pop-up that's going to help me control and set up a specific voting session. Something that I need to point out is that you can run multiple voting sessions in Mural in a specific canvas. And then the other thing that I need to say is that you can actually run a voting session, leave the canvas, and come back later a couple of days and then end the voting session. So the voting session or running a voting session is even awesome when you run asynchronous meetings. So go ahead and use this feature. Great. So how do you set this up? The first thing you want to do is you want to name your voting session, because you're going to build little archives of votes, and perhaps you want to come back and find this one again. So be descriptive. So I'm going to go demo vote number 2, because I've done a couple of these before. And the second element that you control over here is how many votes do people get. So if you imagine and use my analogy of the dot votes in the real world, how many stickers do you want to give to people? Why is that important? If you're running, let's say, design sprints or ideation in design thinking, sometimes you want to give participants, people voting in the activity, the ability to vote on multiple items or give them multiple votes. This is where you control it. So for each person participating in the vote, how many votes do you want to give them? And you control that here. So you can increase and decrease the number of votes here. I'm going to just leave it on 2 for this demo and show you how that works. The second element that you control is who can actually end a voting session. Remember, I'm going to show you in a second, I'm going to activate the voting session as a facilitator, but then as a facilitator, at some point, I need to say, okay, guys, we've received enough votes, or we run out of time, the timer has run out, let's end the voting session. And then I need to click a button to end that. However, you can also set that any person in the canvas can end the voting session. Perhaps you have a little bit more of an intimate team, everybody's got a bit of control, and you want to assign that ability to anybody. But for the most part, you will probably leave it on only facilitators can control or end a voting session. Now, here is one of the most important features when it comes to voting. Now, remember my long story at the beginning. I mentioned that if you start a voting session, if I had to start it right now, people can actually go around with their virtual sticky notes and stick it everywhere, little sticker votes. They can vote on the header, they can vote on my photo, they can vote on anything. You want to control what people are able to vote on. And this is what this little control area here enables you to do. So what you'll see here with these little tick boxes, it represents all the content that people are able to vote on. So for example, files, areas, images, any content that people are able to vote on. So for example, a titled area. Title areas is actually great to vote on if you want to create clusters, but more on that later. Anyways, so usually what I do is I come in to control myself and say, listen, let's just clear everything out. I want people to be able to vote on these 3 sticky notes over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate and say, listen, only sticky notes. People can cast a vote on sticky notes. Now, with that being said, perhaps I need to keep in mind that on this canvas that I'm sharing here, there's multiple sticky notes. Of course, there's my 3 ideas, but I have a whole set of sticky notes all over the canvas. And if I activate the vote now, people can still go out and vote on any area or any sticky note on the canvas. I want to control that. This is where this last element comes in. So where to vote. So I can allow people to vote anywhere on the canvas. So perhaps you've set it out that all the ideas are located on the canvas and they can indeed do that. But for the most part, you want to control what people vote on. So you want to click here and say selected area. And that's exactly what I've done. That's going to take you to the next step. So if I click on next, what will happen is that you'll have the ability to actually control the demarcated area of the vote. So I can clear out this little box, make it larger. But for the most part, here is all the sticky notes. So I can't vote outside this box, only with this area that's highlighted here, I can vote. So my 3 ideas are there and my box is nicely set up and I'm ready to start my vote. Other element I want to point out, and this is kind of persistent when you're running votes, you'll see this as a facilitator, is that there's a little top bar here that contains some additional information. So here is a little bit of a highlight. Okay, I know that there's 2 votes per person. I can go back and edit that if I wanted to, but I'm now able to start the voting session. Once I hit the start, and sometimes it takes a couple of seconds, the voting session will activate. You'll see at the background there, it took me to the area that I demarcated, but then also everybody, not only the facilitator, will get this little pop-up that you see over here. This pop-up indicates to everybody that the voting session is now active. It gives you a little bit of instructions of how to add content here if you want to. And once you're ready to start voting, you can dismiss this and start your voting session. Now to vote, and this is for everybody, not only the facilitators, all you have to do is click on a sticky note and you'll see that there's a little indicator here that I've indeed now done a vote on this sticky note. Of course, I can go over and click here and add my second vote, or if I right click, I can remove the vote and then add it to idea number 2. Now, as a facilitator function, I want to point out one important element here for you. And this is persons voting at a specific period of time. Now, at the moment, I only have a visitor with me here in the canvas. You can see that the visitor, and this is a dormant visitor, he's just hanging out here on the side, is not doing anything, he's not participating in the vote, and he's got 2 votes left. That will count down as this person starts voting. Now, you will have a much longer list that this will be represented by everybody who's currently active in the canvas. And this is great as a facilitator, is just to have a look at this list to see who's currently voting and where's the activity. Perhaps when you're running bigger sessions with 50, 60, 70 people, you're not going to wait for everybody to finish the vote. This area is great to see where you get critical mass and when you can end the vote, or because you can see people's names here when they're members, you can actually just prompt people to say, listen, hey, Bob, are you having a problem voting, or is everybody finished? I can see there's about 5 people who haven't voted yet. Is there a problem? What can I do to help you? You can kind of prod people along to get a feeling for who's voting and who's not been voting. Now, after this, I'm just going to close that down. The session is running, people can vote and interact, and now I'm going to end the voting session. By ending it, I click on this little button over here. We'll end the voting session. I'll get a prompt again to make sure. I'm going to click this, and this is all functionality for the facilitator. I click the end voting session, and then automatically what happens is the actual results page pops up. Now, there's a couple of things I want to point out here. Of course, the most obvious is that the results sits here, and usually this list will be a bit longer if you have a larger voting session, but then also you have the ability to see all the sessions that happened before. So I ran a little test before. I can access this little vote that I've done before, or I can go back to the most current vote and then have the results and review the results over here and get an idea for where people's thinking is at. Now, the second thing I want to show or point out is that I'm not able to actually dismiss this. But then what you'll see is this bar here is pervasive. It sits here, but it's got a specific functionality. Now, what's cool about the voting session is that even though I've dismissed the results, I can still see the results indicated here as little dots on the actual sticky notes. So if you keep this bar active, you can still see what people have voted on. It gives you a little bit of a visual indicator of the voting results here. I've had an older voting session, so if I click on that, it'll activate in this round, idea number one, it got 2 votes. You can see that's active, so I can toggle between that. However, I might be tired of seeing that visual indication. I can go over here and then dismiss this bar. Now, at a later point, you might want to see the bar again, or maybe get to the results. How do I do that? Once again, I'm going to point out, you go up to the top here, and if I click down here, you'll see there's a little bit more functionality that is available to you within the voting element. So you can start a voting session. This is the one we just did. I can go in and I can actually see the results page again. So for example, if I want to get back to the results page, that's what that hyperlink does. I'm going to just dismiss that again. If I go back in there again, I can go and actually show the votes. So that'll bring my bar back. So I'm going to do that just to demo that that's working. So I can see these little icons again. And of course, I can go back in here and I can go and delete a voting session. So if I click on that, it's going to give me access to which voting sessions. So I can tick that over here. I can decide which ones I want to delete and then remove it completely from the results page. I'm going to just leave them there for now. So this is kind of a bit of an overview of all the functionality that is available to you as running voting sessions. They're awesome to get a quick feel for how the room's feeling, so it doesn't have to be super formal. The other thing that I want to remind you, though, is that I didn't mention that in the demo, is that you can run the voting session in conjunction with the timer. So the timer is not going to affect the end of the vote. You as a facilitator still need to end the vote, but it's a great way to just give people a little bit of urgency when it comes to voting. As easy as that. I hope you're going to give it a try. So let's look at how you can take control of what people are seeing on the canvas, nudge them, and sometimes if you have to, force them to join you to a certain area. In this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the summoning feature as another feature that is available to you as a facilitator. Now, in one of the previous clips, I quickly indicated that there is indeed a functionality available, and this is the one that I use most of the time because it's a little bit more gentle. It's the follow functionality, and this is available to everybody, visitors, facilitators, members alike, is that you're able to follow someone. So for example, just for this demo, I have one visitor active currently with me here in the canvas. I just called him Bob for this exercise. But if I click on Bob's little icon here, it'll take me to Bob. And in fact, I'm now following Bob. So I'm seeing exactly what Bob's doing. I can break free and I can see Bob is actually looking at some of the content we used earlier. And I know where he is at the canvas. However, this is not what I want. As a facilitator, I want Bob and whoever else is in the canvas to join me here. I need to explain this activity. I want to grab their attention and I want to bring people together at this point of the canvas. As a facilitator, I can do that by using the summoning command. Now, summoning lives here at the bottom. Remember, all the active users currently in the canvas is over here, is listed over here. I have to go down to my little icon here. I'm going to zoom in slightly and you'll see when I hover over my icon, I have a whole set of functionality available to me. Just as a little bit of a digression, you're also able, when you go here, to actually activate, deactivate cursors, have a little bit of control of what people are seeing, especially when you're sharing the screen. Sometimes when you bring in multiple people and there's like tons and tons of cursors flying around, as a facilitator, I would recommend that you switch some of those cursors off because it can distract attention a little bit. However, we're here to talk about summon. So if I go over here, I'm just going to highlight that. Here is the summoning feature. So before I click that, I just want to indicate that summon also indicates to you how many people are actually in the canvas. Something to keep in mind, if you have 1,000 people in there, you click summon, you're going to drag 1,000 people to a certain point in the canvas. However, that said, let's click on summon and see what happens. So I'm going to activate that feature now. I'm going to summon Bob to join me in this area, and I'm going to explain to you what happens. Now, you can't see this, but Bob has been moved to this area, and Bob now exactly sees what I'm seeing. So I can, with confidence, look at this indicator bar here, and I can see who's been summoned and who's actually in this area with me. And I can go ahead and release them or take full control. But before I get into the full control, let me explain something about this, what I call soft summoning. So Bob has been somewhere else in the canvas. I hit summon. I brought all the users to this area. Now what is these users able to do? They can move around and they can break free and go off and do their own thing once again. However, there is times, and I always urge people to use this sparingly, where you want to take full control. You want full focus on, let's say, description of activity, or perhaps there's a little bit of a presentation that you need to deliver and you want people to follow along through a certain amount of steps. This is where this take control comes into play. So here, this second element here. Now, when I click this and activate that, I take full control of everybody's viewport here. This means as I move across the canvas, everybody will see what I'm seeing, and they will move along with me. However, something that is important to keep in mind here is that if I forget to release them, they're going to be stuck in this state forever. They can't add sticky notes, they can't interact or collaborate. So this is something that we don't use often, and I encourage you to use sparingly. And something else that I want to also encourage you, if you choose to use this for summon and have control of everybody's screens, please don't forget to release them. But they will probably also be quick to come off mute and remind you. So to release people and give them back full control of their functionality, you click on this little link over here, and that will release people and give them the functionality back, and then they'll be able to go ahead and do their own thing again. So the summoning is really great when you want to draw attention of everybody in the session to a specific piece of content, when you want to deliver some instructions. And of course, from time to time, perhaps there's some context you have to deliver and you want to take them through a little mini presentation, and then you can use the summoning feature to get that done. I'm all for collaboration, but I think one of the most important aspects of collaboration is allowing space for individuals to shine. And this is where the next feature comes in quite handily, and we're going to be covering private mode. Now, I'm highlighting 2 use cases for private mode here, so it's very high-level use cases. You might find more, but just to give some context, in normal sessions, there is times where perhaps you're running an ideation session where there's some senior people, or you're sharing or prioritizing ideas, and people might be a bit nervous to share their real thoughts and feelings, and they might follow the wallet or the seniority. So they're going to kind of vote with what the senior person says. So you need some functionality to avoid that. You need people to be able to express themselves as individuals. The other thing that I want to point out here is anonymity. So for example, you're running a retrospective, someone's giving feedback about my ability to deliver these video clips, and they want to do this in an anonymous way. You want to create a space for people to do that safely and securely. Now, before I go into the demonstration of how private mode works, I just want to indicate or point out a little feature that not a lot of people know about that is very handy, but is something that this private mode wants to work against to make sure that people are comfortable, especially when it comes to anonymity. So, for example, when I add a piece of content, of course, this is digital, everything is tracked. And in fact, if I, as a facilitator or a member, click on this piece of content and then right-click on it, I have a little contextual menu here, and this is by design. I can see that there's a little info flyout over here. So if I hover over that, I can see that indeed Werner Pucher has added this piece of content. This is super useful when you run a session. Let's say people share a bunch of ideas. It's an open session with a team, and people start adding content, and you want to quickly ask, who's added this piece of content? I can right click, see, hey, Susan, I like what you said here. Could you elaborate a little bit? So this is really handy. However, it's less handy when it comes to wanting people to be anonymous, or perhaps if you want people to avoid groupthink. However, let's address 2 of these aspects. The first aspect I want to address is like, how do you avoid groupthink in your session? So Both of these are going to work with the private mode setting, and I'm going to show you where that is right now. And as always, you go to the top right corner here and you'll see these little spy goggles over here, and this is private mode. Of course, the next thing I'm going to say is in all the clips is you click on private mode, and this is going to enable you to set up some settings here to enable what type of private mode you want. So you have two options here. Option number one is no, keep authors of this content anonymous. Now remember when I showed you, and I'm going to demo in a second how this works, that you can actually track the person who's added the piece of content. If I tick this radio button, it will actually allow me to hide that content forever. You'll never ever be able to access that. So that's great for anonymity. The one that I want to demo first is that for the time that there's private mode, please just go into private mode. I can see who's added the contents afterward. Now, to activate private mode, I just hit start here. Everybody will get a prompt. So when I click there and I say, great, I got it. We are now going to go into private mode. Just remember, if you're sharing your screen as a facilitator, people can still see what you're adding. However, for everybody else, their content will now be anonymous. So I'm going to ask Bob what he thought of my video clips. He needs to give me a little bit of feedback. And he's going to go across to the canvas here, add his sticky note with his feedback. And then you'll see that there's indeed sticky notes appearing. And Bob is very busy adding content. He's got one sticky note there. And now back to the functionality of the facilitator. So what do I do? Once again, I can time box this using the timer if I want to. Would actually encourage you to do that. However, as per the voting sessions, you need to go in as a facilitator and actually end private mode. Once again, private mode will stay active. And in fact, you can leave private mode on for a couple of days if you want to. It will only switch off until you or one of your facilitators, co-facilitators come in and actually end private mode. Now, the most exciting part, I've done many kind of ideation sessions, is actually when you end private mode. So for example, I'm going to end private mode right now, and this is going to reveal all the content here. So oops, I'm going to get a prompt over here and I'm going to end private mode. Everybody's going to see that private mode's ending. They'll get their prompts and boom, there's Bob's feedback. I can now see what's on the sticky note. And this is a proof. However, the person with me in the canvas here is a visitor. If I right click on that, go to the information, I can still see that Bob has added this piece of content. So Bob has indicated that he wants more waistcoats. I've got no problem with that. However, now I want to go into a private mode session where I want people to have real, honest, and direct feedback. And for that, I go back into private mode once again. So I'm going to demo how this works. Here's private mode, activate that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the anonymous feature. So if I click on that, this means that any content that is added to the canvas after I've started private mode will remain anonymous forever. You can ask our help section here at Mural, not even they would be able to help you. It will remain anonymous. And to prove that that works, I'm going to start the session here. It's going to give everybody the prompt and the warning that private mode is starting. And of course, if I go here to the top bar, once private mode kicks in, you'll see that the private mode is once again indicated over here and it's active. And then I'm going to ask Bob to add content again. However, I should probably not tell you that it is Bob, right? But let's quickly test the functionality. So it comes in, adds the content. You'll see the content being added once again. You don't know who that is. You can't see the cursor or any indicator. So if there's multiple people will be adding the content. And then once that is done, once again, I can run it over a couple of days or whenever I want to end it. The facilitator comes in, goes to the top here, and then ends private mode. That'll give everybody a prompt. And then I can end the private mode. And then we go back into seeing what is on the mural. The content is now available to read. So what's up with the strange accent? Whoever's given me that feedback, sorry, born with it. I'm a South African. However, just to prove to you, I'm going to right click on this, go into show info. And what you'll see here is that it'll indicate to you that this content is anonymous. It's been added in private mode. So you cannot track or ever know who's added the sticky note. So this is a great way, once again, for you to capture content either anonymously or avoid groupthink. Some great little use cases here using private mode. And I invite you to give it a test drive. It's time to show a little bit of love and appreciation as we head towards the end of this series of video clips. Now, there's a little bit of a functionality here at the bottom of the canvas that people sometimes forget to use or implement during their activities in Mural. And this is the actual showing of emotions or just indicating how you feel about certain things. And I would actually encourage you as a facilitator to prompt people to actually go and use these. And how they work, these emotions, is just if I agree with something or I want to show a little bit of love or celebrate, I can click on that. And this functionality is available to any of the collaborators in the canvas. Being a visitor or a member, people can interact or show their appreciation to each other by using these emojis over here. However, as a facilitator, you have a little bit of extra functionality. So if I go over here, you'll see that I have this element here called celebration. And yes, we've been accused of using the celebration feature a little bit too much in Mural, but I really encourage you to, at the end of an activity or a strenuous work session, just to click on the celebration, just to show appreciation to everybody who has participated in this, and also a little bit of appreciation from me to you for watching all these video clips. Thank you for watching all these video clips, or at least dipping into a couple of them. Hopefully you've learned something new, or at least unlocked a little bit of knowledge around the facilitation superpower that you're aiming to use in one of your upcoming sessions. Something that I want to highlight here, though, is that I think you get the fact that it is all about removing stumbling blocks and also getting people to collaborate together more effectively. What is important, though, and something that people overlook sometimes, facilitators, is that you can use these feature sets even in smaller meetings and sessions. Don't leave them for the big workshops later on. The reason I'm saying that is one of the things that I want you to focus on is actually to get comfortable using these feature sets and use them on the fly. Because when you're running these big, more important sessions, you don't want to be thinking about functionality. You just want to focus on the collaboration. Now at Mural, we've really tried, and I believe that these features are really intuitive and easy to use, but you want to get comfortable. Then a second best practice element that I want to mention once again, because I've lived through this a couple of times, is remember to add that co-facilitator. Bring a buddy into your activities in your sessions. Gives you the confidence, but then also have someone to look after you as you go through this, because at the end of the day, we have to navigate a whole bunch of loose ends and technology as we go through these activities. And yeah, just go out there, use these superpowers and have fun. Then, if you want to know anything more, drop into the comments, ask your questions. You can also find me, Vander Puchert, Senior Success Architect and Senior Success Manager at Mural, on LinkedIn, and I invite you to connect with me there and ask any questions. Thanks for watching.